Peters. I manage the Ghetto Film School roster, which is an arm of Ghetto Film School geared towards our alumni and emerging professionals. And we are very thrilled to have Paul Ryan with us today. Paul is a producer, an editor. He's currently supervising on 80 For Brady, a film that's going to come out early next year. It's coming. But Paul also teaches and is a great resource for all of you and all of the roster who are exploring your careers at various stages. And so Paul's here to get to know you and also share a little bit about what he's learned about career readiness and networking and kind of navigating these creative specters that we've already touched on in conversation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to do a better introduction that I could do for you. But thanks so much for being here.
You're very welcome. I'm not sure I can do better than that. Amy had sort of brought me up to speed on what Ghetto Film School is all about and what everyone here is sort of generally focused on and studying. I have a few slides on a PowerPoint. I don't want to lean into that too much, especially with a few of us here. It seems like there's a good opportunity to just engage you directly about your specific situations that I can maybe offer some insight into. Just a little bit about myself, and this is helpful for me to just sort of walk through it. I received a bachelor's of business administration and marketing from Texas A&M University. That was sort of my undergrad experience when I was not really 100% sure of what I was going to do with my life. When I got to the end of those 4 years, that's when I realized I was either going to have to go get like a real job or have to figure out like sort of what my life's pursuits were really going to be. And I knew that I not only loved watching movies, but that I had made several short films on my own. I had studied movies a lot. I'd read a lot of books on the subject, and gosh, wouldn't it be great if you could have a career in the movie business? So that starts with working at I attended some film festivals, and I was able to meet an editor in those years, a guy named Neil Travis. Neil, at that time, had just come off of editing a film called Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner, and he won the Oscar for that movie. And he was at the film festival. I went down and talked to him, expressed my interest in making movies. We hit it off. He invited me out to California to work as an intern on one of his films. That was a movie, and I think to this day, it's the only movie directed by Morgan Freeman, the actor Morgan Freeman. It was a lower budget film, but that was good for me because he needed more manpower. And so even as an unpaid intern, I got to learn film editing from somebody who had just won an Oscar. So that was a pretty good situation for me. And my advice generally to all of you is if you have opportunities, even for unpaid internships, they can lead to a lot of things. You can meet a lot of very good people. And in that case, because they weren't paying me a whole lot of money, it was easier to ask favors. That's always the trade-off, is that if they're not paying you, ask for favors. And in that case, that's when I asked Morgan Freeman if he would give me a letter of recommendation to film school. And Mr. Freeman said, yeah, I can do that. So he wrote a letter of recommendation to me. And I think that's a big part of how I ended up at USC in their film program. And at that point, I was there for, that's the grad program. So that's, a couple of years. And then I was into thesis. So I was there for like the latter part of the 1990s. So then after film school, I've done a lot of different jobs. I wrote and directed a feature film. I've worked in producing. More recently, I'll talk to you a little bit about what I do as a post-production supervisor. But also in the in between times, I also teach, as Amy pointed out, some of the schools I've taught at Brooks Institute of Photography, which was out in Ventura, California. Loyola Marymount, Mount St. Mary's, and currently I am teaching at Chapman University down in Orange County. They've got a pretty good program there. It's where, if any of you watch Stranger Things, the creators of Stranger Things are from the Chapman Film School. Good kids. So as a post-production supervisor, recently, these are a couple of movies that I've worked on. These were both Netflix films. The Dirt is a dramatization about the 80s metal band Motley Crue. So it's kind of like Bohemian Rhapsody or Rocket Man, that type of film. And then just within the last couple of years, right before the pandemic hit, I was working on this movie with Issa Rae and Kumail Nanjiani called The Lovebirds. That's a Paramount movie that was going to go into theaters, but that was right in like April of 2020. And that's when like everything started shutting down. So Lovebirds was sold to Netflix, and that's sort of where that movie has lived ever since. But that was a lot of fun to work on. Funny movie, and good people to work with as well. And right now, as Amy said, I'm working on this movie that's called 80 for Brady. And this movie is in post-production right now. So there's only so much I can say and share about it. This was a publicity photo that they released. But so you might have heard of a guy named Tom Brady. He is a professional quarterback, apparently pretty good. Others would say the greatest. So on the left here, this is Rita Moreno, and there's Lily Tomlin, and we've got the GOAT, and then we've got Jane Fonda and Sally Field. And it's a comedy about these four ladies who are very good friends who want to go see Tom Brady play in a Super Bowl, and all of the hijinks that they get involved in that world. So that's my day job right now, and just outside this door down the hall, I've got the editors of the movie who are busy at work. We've got a director currently with us who is given 10 weeks to edit his version of the film, and we're coming up on those 10 weeks right now, and we're all feeling very good about it, and should be a lot of fun. Hopefully comes out in the fall. So as a post-production supervisor, I'm sure that a lot of you aren't super familiar with what that job is. Maybe some of you are. It's a producing job. It's focused specifically on getting the movie done. So everything that happens after you're on set. We all know that there's like three phases of movie production, right? That there's pre-production, production, and post-production. So this is the last phase where we edit the movie, we add the music, we create some visual effects. The composer comes to work, creates the beautiful score for the film. Those of you who have made your own films probably know that there's a process called color finishing, where you might take your footage into a program like Resolve and make it look really great. So that's all part of this process. It's the exact same process that you would have on almost any budgeted film. But we just we do it the Hollywood way, and that's sort of what I do. Is that I stay on top of all of those expenses, the people who need to work on it, making sure that they have everything that they need, that we stay on the schedule, and make sure that the studio gets the movie that they want on the calendar that they want it. If any of you know what a unit production manager is, that's kind of what a post supervisor is. It's just that I focus just on the final phase of the film. And if you don't know what a UPM is, we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing now. And I guess I would say that over the years, because I've done so many different types of jobs, I feel like, if you have questions on pretty much any aspect of things, please feel free to ask. And if I go to the PowerPoint, I might not see your hand raised. Just go ahead and yell at me. That's totally fine.
Hi, Paul. My name
Hello.
is Brandon Nelson. I have a quick question for you. I don't know if you were ready to take questions yet.
Yes, please go ahead.
Are you? Okay. So, I actually just recently got accepted to Temple University as a director student in narrative. Thank you.
Great.
And my question to you is what are ways that I can network as a director? Um, I have I've done a web series before, but it's been a while. I haven't had like a linear film career,
Yeah.
to be quite honest with you. But now I've dedicated myself to this journey and at least, completing the education side of things by the time I turn 30, which is in the next year or so. So I'm just wondering how I can network.
Yeah. Use the time wisely and get
Yeah.
to where you want to be. I think that first of all, congratulations. That's terrific news, and I hope that you get everything out of that that you would like. Um, Before I launch into the other answer, just generally, as a director, what types of movies do you like? What do you aspire to make?
Hmm. Honestly, I aspire to tell stories of my people. I feel like a lot of, I feel like there's been a renaissance with, like, for instance, directors like Issa Rae, and Gina, and Ava, but um, I'd like to keep that going with different genres. For instance, like a Jordan,
Mhm.
who is doing horror, amazingly.
Yeah.
So I can't say that there's a specific genre. It's just trying to push that movement forward, if that makes sense.
I think it does. I think that you're saying that you have personal experience and stories that you're working with and want to tell them from your perspective. And I think it's a great time for that. Not just in that that some doors of opportunity are being opened in a way that they have not been opened in the past. I think that there's also an appetite for these films and these stories that is larger now than it might have been in the past. So, and frankly, it's a business, and the business will follow that, and they'll want these stories. They'll want to hear your experience, and whether it's something just if it's a very I don't know, a more straightforward narrative or drama, or if it's through the lens of something like I'm looking forward to Nope. I'm looking forward to different sort of spins. I mean, Get Out was a terrific film in a lot of ways. It was. And not just in what it said, but it was entertaining at the same time. And I think that people have a big appetite for that. I think that the movie business will reward that, and that's a good thing. With respect to how to network and how you get to the sort of the destination in your career that you want to go, it's there honestly there are as many paths as there are people, and it's like literally every person that I talk to when we get into these conversations about like how they got started and how they got to where they are, everybody has stories that in some respects are very different, but fundamentally are kind of the same, which is being not only prepared for the opportunity when it presents itself, but to put yourself into position for those kind of opportunities to happen. And that's fundamentally what networking is the old expression that it's not what you know, it's who you know. So then the question becomes is, how do you get to know more people? How do you branch your connections when currently you don't have any connections? Or I would say there are some obvious answers. There are some, and I use these examples primarily because these are the situations where you don't need any sort of special invitation. This is like just what's available to you and anyone. It's just a question of putting yourself in these environments and these positions. As I was just remarking while we were getting started, my own personal example was I went to a film festival. That's kind of was the first step to me. I mean, I had been to other film festivals before and watched people. I actually saw Wes Anderson at a film festival before he was anybody. He was just doing short films at that point, and I spoke to him for a little while. But you know, honestly, it's a question of what you're trying to the results that you're trying to generate from the people that you meet. And I would say that in my example, I went to a film festival and I personally was interested in editing anyway. So I made it a point to see this one particular speaker after they showed some scenes and did a Q&A. And that's, if you haven't attended a lot of film festivals, that's exactly what happens. It's like, it's a screening, then there's a Q&A. And if you don't know this already, when the Q&A is over, there's kind of another Q&A that happens that's less formal. It's more like everybody leaves the theater, but then about a dozen people walk down to the front of the theater. You want to be one of those dozen people. And, you know, these people are guests at these events for a reason. They're there to speak to you and to get to know you and offer advice. So don't be shy about that. That's expected. Even if it means following them out to the lobby and out to the parking lot, as long as you're not stalking them at that point, I think it's all fair game. And in my case, it was a situation where, because I had enough of a background in filmmaking already, I was able to speak a little bit of Neil's language, and we just kind of, I don't know any other way to put it other than that we hit it off. And we ended up, after that Q&A, going with a whole group of people to dinner where we continued the conversation. And you know, it's sort of just at the end of that day, I just kind of blurted out, you know, like, what do I need to do? Like, I mean, you've just won an Oscar, you've been working for years, how do you do this? And, you know, a lot of people in Neil's position give you the same advice, which is that you have to be ready to enter at the ground level. And if you're willing to do that, you might have an opportunity. And in this case, he was just starting another movie and said, look, I can't pay you anything, but if you want to come out and learn editing, come out to California. And I did. And that's why I generally say, look for those kind of opportunities. If you can do it without the larger concern of making a living. I mean, that is a hard thing to do. And, you know, I had to like move out to LA and, you know, and get by for a good couple of months before that production was actually realized, oh, Paul kind of knows what he's doing. Would you like a full-time position as our post-production assistant? Like, oh, that's a paid job? Yes. So next thing you know, now you've started the process. Like, that's like when you knock dominoes down, like get them going. It's like, that's the first domino that fell. It's like, okay, so now I have an actual job making money on a movie. And also I'm meeting people, you know, it's not just at that point, it's not just Neil. Within a couple of weeks, that's when Morgan Freeman himself started showing up to the editing room. And in those years, that was also a producer in the movie was Arsenio Hall, who might be a little before your time, but Arsenio Hall was a producer on the film, and he was in there. And so I'm meeting Arsenio, I'm meeting Morgan Freeman, I'm meeting in those days, you'd have at least 3 assistant editors. So I met all of those individuals. Next thing you know, we're like, hey, you want to play basketball tonight? Now you're playing basketball. Who are they playing basketball with? Other editors. Like, everybody sort of knows each other. And next thing you know, you're meeting all of these people who you otherwise had not met before. And I think the important note is it's not always in a professional context. It's sometimes it's very social. And frankly, make sure that you have interests and pursuits that are not just the movie business, because sometimes people don't want to talk about the movie business when you're playing basketball or when you're at dinner or whatever. You want to talk about sports or, like, you know, a million other things. that have nothing to do with the business. And that's how, you know, it's like any sort of social network that you build with people who are not in the movie business. It's just people who have common interests. So you make sure that, you know, in those days, those were a little more difficult because everybody didn't have a phone that you could just immediately punch contacts into. But today it's super easy. So make sure that you do that. Get the names, get the contact, and they'll offer it. They'll say, yeah, man, when you're looking for a job, hit me up. And to this day, I have those exact same conversations with people. It's like, oh yeah, can I send you a text? Or I'll say, can I send you a text? And you stay in communication with people. And I want to say that on this movie that I'm on right now, the people that hired me onto this film, I met maybe a year and a half before this movie, before this came around. And I would say that generally, there's also this, because there are a lot of cliches in this world. It's like the more you work, the more you work. That's a very true expression. But the more that you're out there working with people, the more likely it is that you'll be remembered. You'll do a good job. When they go to make their next movie, they will think of you to hire you again. And next thing you know, you have all sorts of opportunities, whereas years before you had none. You had zero opportunities. So I would say that as a director, Brianna, meet other directors by going to film festivals. Their producers will likely be there as well. I think that for directors, it's also super important to network with actors. And I'm not talking about famous people. I'm just talking about actors in general, people who are on the way up, people who, they're looking at you as somebody who, like, well, maybe someday I could cross paths and, I could be in a movie that Brianna's going to direct, and you'll be looking at them as like, that's a really talented actor. Maybe I can hire that person onto a movie that I'll do someday. Or maybe it'll be like a really inexpensive, like no budget movie, and you'll do it, like the actor won't even work for money, but they're just a good performer and you've got a very good story or point of view that you want to get across. And next thing you know, you've got a film that people see. And it's like, that's what I'm talking about, where you want to create your own opportunities. That's, for me, that's the most important thing that I've learned, is that every once in a while, there are some opportunities that come out of the blue, but not very often. And even the ones that feel like they come out of the blue probably came out of somebody having a conversation with somebody else who recommended you from some job years ago or whatever. So you plant these seeds and they grow over a very long period of time.
Thank you so much for answering my question. I really appreciate that. I have like one more question to ask you really quick.
Sure.
What's a second job or position or discipline that you would suggest that would align with a director? Like, for instance, they always say if you do film, you should have two talents. So if you direct, you should be able to produce. If you produce, you should be able to, do something else. So what's something else that I guess you would suggest?
From my perspective, I think you just answered it in your own question. I think that producing, having that skill set is really, really valuable. There's this idea that nobody, in Hollywood is going to hire somebody who wants to be a director. They hire somebody who is a director. So what that means is like somebody who has history, some sort of resume. And the question is like, well, how do I have a resume? How can I get the job and the experience if I can't get the first job to start with? So a very time-tested technique in the movie business is create your own resume. It's like you create your own work history by creating your own content. That's the real value of creating your own content, is the illustration to people around you that this is something that you are good at doing. It's the issue at hand, of course, is that when it comes to creating your own content, it does that goes hand in hand with being able to have the financial ability to put together a production of some kind. Even the least expensive movie will still cost a certain amount of money. There are hard costs that that go hand in hand with making a movie that you can't get away from. Even if you get your camera for free and your wardrobe for free and your locations for free, you still have to feed people. And if you're feeding people over a certain number of days, it's like it all adds up. So you need to learn sort of the realities of producing in order to be good at content creation. So I would say, this is the method of writing your own ticket. And you can do that as a director. And there are plenty of people who are directors who are also producers for that exact reason. Even as you go up the rung, as you advance in your career, you will find that there are directors who continue to wish to retain some sort of producing authority on their movies for their control, just being able to make the movie in their vision that they want to have, as opposed to working with an outside producer who may or may not share their point of view on everything. My experience is that usually a director gets hired by a producer specifically because they like their creative approach, but you can't always count on that. And there's really nothing better than having the tools of your own knowledge to create your own content when no one else will hire you to do it. At that point, it's really just about getting the money and then understanding how to schedule and budget a film correctly and to crew it and cast it as best as you can, and hiring the right people around you to make that production go as smoothly as possible. I try to avoid name dropping too much, but I think I'm okay with this one, but only because she was just yesterday got nominated for 2 Emmys. But a former student of mine, just within the last couple of years, is a young actress named Sydney Sweeney, and she was really big into learning producing as an actor. And she took, I think, 2 producing classes of mine. And for the exact reasons that we're talking about, is that even if you are getting jobs, it's still true that having the skill set of production is something that allows you to control your destiny to some degree. And people really like that. Other people would tell you that it's good for directors to also have a background in acting, in performance itself, to understand sort of how to work with actors. I mean, I think that there is probably value in that. I don't know that acting is a very good fallback profession for a lot of people, but when people call, it's like, well, if directing doesn't work out, I'll be an actor. It's like, nah, it doesn't really work that way. It's very hard to get a job as an actor, even harder than it is to get a job as a director. I think it's also valuable for directors to have the editing skill set. I think a lot of the best directors have that visual sense in their mind and understand like when a moment works and when you should cut away from it, and how much of this scene do I actually need to capture on film instead of overdoing it. I think that editing for that reason is a good skill set to have. There are directors who come up from cinematography. I think that's, for me, that's less of a consideration as a director. It is a visual medium, but there are a lot of very, very talented cinematographers that if you have a baseline understanding, that might be enough. Basically, Rana, what I'm saying is you can't go wrong. But I think that as a dual skill set, if it's my choosing, I'm probably going either with producing or editing. That's just my personal opinion. Another point that I like to make is in the early going, in terms of networking, your classmates are often your best points of contact, for better or for worse. I know that for some people that's a great thing, and for some people they're like, oh no. But it's right now, these are the people who you have the strongest connection with and the strongest career goals in mind that you share. So I think that always think of your classmates as being the people that once you're out of school, that these ideally will be people who will continue working their way into the business, and somebody who you went to school with could one day very easily be somebody in position to hear a pitch from you they could be working at a production company, or the other way around. You might be able to hire somebody who was a really talented cinematographer or something like that you knew when you went to school with. The movie business is full of stories like that. People who met each other in school and then continued working into the future.
Paul, we had a few questions.
Yes.
From folks that are here on this call, and I know we have some emerging producers with us today. One question was, what do you think future producers should do now in developing their skills to become a great producer in the future? That was from Ogechi.
What can producers do now?
I took that question to mean, and Ogechi, hop in if I'm wrong, but as you're after you've finished Ghetto Film School and are maybe studying various things in college, and maybe your next gig might not be a producer gig. Like, what are other skills that are complementary or great gigs to strengthen yourself? Am I on the right track?
Yeah, and I think that as you're saying that, one of the very first things that comes to my mind is a very true reality, which is to be open to pretty much all opportunities very early in your career. Most of us will go to a school to study or refine a particular discipline, whether it's screenwriting or directing or cinematography or some very specific skill. But it's also true that when you leave school, you have very little control over what your first jobs are going to be. And so even though you studied to be a director, your first job out of film school is going to be a PA in an office getting coffee for everybody else or whatever. I mean, that's honestly very often the first stop for a lot of people. And first of all, I would say, get that job. If that job is presented to you, your answer should be yes. If it's a paying gig, for sure, because working as a PA in an office, in a production office, you are going to learn a huge amount about the producing side. In the office, you'll learn all of the paperwork, and there's all sorts of paperwork that goes in hand with the movie business. Secondarily, you could be hired as a production assistant on set, in which case you're going to be working probably with the AD, the assistant director, wrangling extras and all sorts of other not particularly glamorous jobs. But again, you take the job because you're going to learn a great deal about movie making in that process. And I think that largely I'd be saying, if your long-term goal is to be a producer, that if in the near term you're not actually producing films, which would be the best way to have experience, it's just by producing and doing things wrong and doing things right. The next best thing is to be working on those types of productions in almost any capacity at all. Because if you're in the camera department, you're going to see things from their perspective. There's kind of like just a general sense that the production assistant, the PA, is sort of the bottom rung of the ladder, and that might be true, but it's almost everybody's point of entrance. So don't have any bad feelings or reservations about taking that job. I mean, I PA'd myself. It's like everybody does. You don't want to do it for a real long time, because the idea is like, while you're a production assistant, that's when you're doing your networking. On that point, I think I had a thought that I wanted to pass along on who are, when you get with these kind of jobs, who should you network with? Now, some of you will know this, but some of you might not know this. It might feel like networking with a producer is like the best thing that you can do. And frankly, yes, if you could get a job as an assistant to a producer, that's a good job to have. You're going to learn a huge amount about producing just by being their assistant. However, it's also true that because the producer is the highest authority on most motion picture productions, it's hard to engage with that person. They typically are they might not be around as much. They might not have an opportunity to pass along as much. And a lot of the the decision-making and the day-to-day of movie producing is delegated to others, most notably a person called a unit production manager, also called a UPM. Again, as a teacher, my experience is that coming into film school is that a lot of students have never heard of a UPM. They don't know what a unit production manager is. And you really, really need to know. It's one of the most important people that you will possibly ever meet on a film production. Not the least of which is because the UPM is very likely going to hire you. One of the UPM's main jobs is to negotiate deals and hire crew. Their main job for the producer is honestly to spend the money that the producer has financed. That's the job. And many producers know a lot about, let's say, the creative side of movies that they like, but they don't know much about physical production. Your lead producer is not the person who calls up Panavision looking for a camera package or those kind of things, or the grip house looking for like silks and C-stands and sandbags. But somebody has to do that job. And who does that? Like unit production managers are the people who often have come up through the production ranks, and they know what things cost, and they know when you're overpaying, and they know when you're getting a good deal. So the UPM, first of all, as a career path, is a terrific career path. It's a DGA union job. It's very well paid, and there's a lot of responsibility and creativity with it. And when you are working on a movie, if you get hired as a PA and you have long-term goals of being a producer, the UPM is definitely one of the people that you want to impress. The UPM will remember your name and hire you again on another movie. And next thing you know, you could be an assistant production coordinator. You get enough hours, you become a production coordinator. Then you become a production supervisor if you want. And then you keep building your hours. You want to become a union unit production manager. So again, just getting back to Amy's question and the idea of like, what can you do now as a producer to set yourself up for the long haul? Again, it's about getting experience. Get on as many sets as you can in almost any capacity. Doesn't matter. Like PA for the camera department, PA for the wardrobe department, PA for the prop department, wherever you're needed. Because in any one of those departments, you're going to learn quite a bit. If you get an opportunity on a lower budgeted film to come in, they tell you, well, we want you to be a PA for the assistant director. Take that job. I cannot tell you how many film students I've heard of very similar stories from who went on to low budget movies starting as PAs. And because they had been through a film school situation and already had at least some knowledge, like they almost immediately knew more than other people who had been hired in higher positions than them. So I've heard from Chapman students who they started as a PA, and within days, I'm not joking, within days were moved up to second AD and then finished the movie as first AD. They actually replaced the first AD because they just knew more. And if you're doing that, that's a very good thing because the producers obviously saw something in you and want to keep you around.
He says, as an editor and director, what is something you look for in editing reels? How do you highlight the invisible art?
Yeah. It's true that it is called the invisible art. So yeah, like, how do I draw attention to something that you're not supposed to be taking attention to? The honest answer will be that once a career is developed, that people can just look at your resume. They'll see like, oh, you were the editor of all these big movies. Like, they'll assume that you're a good editor, but you don't get that sort of treatment at the very beginning. You've got to sort of convince people that you're very good at the process. And I would say that when it comes to a reel for an editor, you should have a balance of material, which is to say that there's kind of an expectation, I think, from some people that with an editor, that editing is about like chop, 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 like music video, like basically very aggressive type of film editing, like in an action scene or something like that, a sequence that calls attention to the cutting. And I think that that's true and that there is value to that. But in a reel, I would recommend that you consider sort of looking at your reel in thirds as an editor. So you might open with something that's very catchy and fast, but it's also important to illustrate that you know as an editor when not to cut, which is when do you let a shot live? When is an emotional moment so beautiful, so truthful, so honest that you don't cut, that you sort of, or that when you make the edit, like someone is telling a poignant story, and eventually you're going to cut away to someone listening to them. But when did you choose that moment? Like, what was it about the moment? It's like, it's sort of that sort of undefinable, intuitive part of the craft, which is just knowing the emotional contour of where the audience wants to be in any given moment in a scene. And you do want to illustrate that if it's possible in a reel. So I would say you do want to play to the aggressive style of editing, the action scene editing, the music video editing, but then there should certainly be at least one section of your reel that is something that's more conventional. Again, you only have so much time, and like, an entire scene could be 4 minutes long, but your reel is only going to be 2.5 or 3 minutes long. So you can't stay there forever, but really highlight, I think, an emotional moment and moments where you chose to go to particular shots and reaction shots of performers, and you illustrated that you knew not to overuse close-ups, that you understood how to like build from a wide shot to an over the shoulder and then went to your single close-up at the right moment. That by itself might only take about 30 seconds in a scene or whatever, and that's all you have to show. And then you could get back to the scene of the person surfing or skateboarding, or like a more of a music video aesthetic, or if you had you had done an action film or something like that, you can use that material as well. But the to put a pin in it, balance. Your reel should show balance. Your ability to cut, to edit in multiple styles, the quiet stuff and the loud stuff.
And then I actually have, sorry, one more question. As I guess like someone from an editing background, I definitely do a lot of reading, a lot of like movie watching and the like. Is there any like literature or resources that you particularly love?
Yeah, I mean, have you read the Walter Murch book?
Yeah.
Okay, so In the Blink of an Eye is probably the most common book that people will refer people to for film editing, because that book is useful in that he doesn't spend a lot of time in the technical side of things. It's mostly about the philosophy of editing, so that's good. That's a different approach. There is an editor named he's not with us anymore. His name was Edward Dmytryk. He goes back to the golden age of Hollywood, the 40s, the 50s. He edited for the Marx Brothers, like that kind of stuff. So he has a book that actually does focus on very point specific technical aspects of film editing. Whereas Murch's book is more about, editing is like Houdini, or editing is like bumblebees, like those kind of observations, which are cool. But with Eddie's book, it's more like the second that an actor's eyes are out of the frame, you have no more than 4 more frames before you have to make your cut. Like it's super specific for those kind of things, and like how long you want to wait until somebody exits right versus when they come in frame left. Those kind of observations. And by extension, he has observations on editing, on directing, on how directors should think and capture coverage when they're on set, so that when you get to the cutting room, that you have all of the pieces that you want. So essentially, warning you, don't just try and get everything in one. And even if you think it's going to work that way in your final cut, and because you saw a movie where the director did it all in one, and you really want to do it that way, it's like, okay, but get 1 or 2 cutaways. Just be safe, get 1 or 2 cutaways, and these are the types of shots that you could potentially use. So it's a little more dry, but it's still good. It's still a good book to read. there's this book called The Complete Film Production Handbook. And that book is written by a woman named Eve Light Hontanner, who is a career production coordinator. This book is sort of an end to end, this is how you make a movie. It's like from if you need to set up a production office and rent furniture and get phones, how do you do that? If you need to clear the trademark of the person wearing the New York Yankees cap in the shot, how do you do that? It's a very, very good book that I would highly recommend. It touches on pretty much every single aspect of film production. One more question that comes up from time to time for people that I get from students a lot is about getting their first jobs. Like, how do you get your first jobs? And some of you might network really well and not have a problem. There's this one, it's kind of a trick, but it works if you're open to it. It's this very last option here. If you're not familiar with Backstage.com, Backstage.com is there primarily for actors. It is there as a resource for actors to take a look at, and casting announcements are made in Backstage all the time. The thing is, those are movies that are Go Productions. So, and all of the contact information is there. So if you want a PA, if you want to be in the AD department or whatever, just contact the exact same productions that are casting for actors. Just send your resume to them. Even though they're not expecting it, say, oh, by the way, I saw your movie is going into production. Boom, you send out a couple of dozen of those. It works every time. If you have no options at all and you're just looking to start building a resume, I promise you, like, some of those productions are going to get back to you and say, you know, actually, we hadn't even thought about this yet, but we do need a second AD. Can you send us your resume or whatever? I over and over again, I recommend this to students. It's kind of a trick. It's kind of a side door. Like, it's not what it's there for, but you can still use it for that if you want. And it has worked for a few students. So I would recommend it if you're looking.
Does it matter if you don't have any experience?
Those are almost always lower budget independent films. So I would take a look at it. I would see, like, sort of who is the director, who is the producer. And then, I mean, you guys all know IMDb, right? The Internet Movie Database. So run their names through IMDb and see if they themselves are first timers, or if it's like a huge, gigantic movie, then no, it probably isn't going to. I take that back. If you're looking for a PA job, send it anyway. Tell them that. Tell them you're looking to PA. And you might be surprised.
Thank you.
Sure. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Amy has taught me all about Ghetto Film School. I was not really aware of this program until recently, and it just seems like such a great opportunity and such a great group of people. And it sounds like so many of you are already off on the right track with your educations and your goals. Just go out there and take over Hollywood and hire me when you have a chance.